All right, hello everyone. Today is September 19th, 2023, which means Aria is 1 year old. So this is actually her first birthday. She's technically kind of like 9 months old since she was 3 months premature. But we decided that we are gonna film part 2, which has been a long process. We've tried to make it a couple of times, but one of the times, life and my dad called once in the middle of the video. So here we are. We're not gonna give a life update right now. That'll come in the future, but we are gonna do part 2 of our first video. So in the first video, if you haven't watched that, please go back and watch. We shared Aria's birth story and what kind of took place with Emily and her. And then also from my perspective as well, going and seeing them at the hospital. And I think we ended with kind of like a positive place that we were in. Aria had started to wean off of the ventilator as far as oxygen, and she actually was extubated. So they took the breathing tube out of her lungs, and she was now on like a CPAP mask, I believe.
Yeah, she actually went down to the RAM cannula, so it's like a nasal cannula, but still on the ventilator.
Yeah, so it went from like extubated to the mask, and then the nasal cannula, which is just kind of like the strip of oxygen under her nose. But she was still on the ventilator, and she was starting to progress. Outside of just breathing, she had to have 7 blood transfusions because of her pulmonary hemorrhage that she suffered on day 2, which almost tried to steal her life from her. And she lost a lot of blood in that. So she kind of had some new blood in her body, which, helped save her life, which is amazing. Her blood levels were able to get to the place where she was stable again after those transfusions. What else was going on outside of just the blood transfusions and oxygen?
We had to fight with her bilirubin levels for a while.
Yep. Some stool issues.
Yeah, it took her about a week to poop for the first time.
I think those are the major things. So it's now about 4 weeks into us being at the NICU, and she was starting to progress. She slowly started to decline with her oxygen. She started to need more oxygen, and eventually got back up to the CPAP mask. And one day, so I had started to go back to work. We were still living in the NICU. We lived there the entire time, but I would go to work during the day. And I came home one night on October 7th, I believe. But tell us about that day while I was at work on October 7th.
So, like you had said, I think it was the few days prior, she started to kind of like just need more oxygen. They weren't really sure what was going on necessarily. She just needed a little bit more support. They switched her back to the mask and thought, okay, we'll just leave her on this for a few days and then try the cannula again. She just needs a little bit extra help these few days. And then that day she was really struggling. Her heart rate, her oxygen levels were all over the place. Every time they tried to touch her, if they moved her at all, she would drop really, really low. They had to crank her oxygen up to 100. It was a rough day. Yeah. And then, I don't know what time it was sometime in the evening. You were, I think, on your way back to the hospital.
Yeah.
And she really was not doing well. They had to bag her at least 6 times in an hour. And I think that also happened when you were there.
Yeah,
so her numbers tanked like dramatically down to, I think her oxygen was in the 20s or 30s. So they had to bag her, so manually breathe for her because she wasn't doing it herself.
It's kind of like a form of almost like resuscitation without like CPR.
Yeah.
You told me about that all day at work, and I was like, okay, Lord, like what's going on? Like we thought we would, we're in the clear with the oxygen situation and her breathing getting better, and then it really was swinging that day. That was a really rough day, and I got off work before they made the decision that they might need to re-intubate her. Because her levels, so when I got there, she was tanking, like you said, heart rate and oxygen levels in like the 20s and 30s, which is close to death.
Yeah, not good.
And it was an experience for me. It was the most spiritual warfare I've ever been in my life, like in the natural even. I wasn't there the first time when she had a pulmonary hemorrhage. I was driving back, but I was there for this. And in the course of an hour, she was bagged or like almost resuscitated 6 times. And it was...
All we could do was just stand there.
Yeah, we just had to stand and watch as they worked on her. But, you know, again, it was in a place of like, for me personally, like in my faith, it wasn't a place of fear of death, but it was just believing life, believing God can, you know, save her life, as well as, you know, the great team of medical doctors and nurses that were there. And she was able to get reintubated. However, it did take 4 times for them to get the tube into her lungs properly. It was just rough to watch. It was really hard to watch. Yeah, but they finally got it. And when they did get it, she started to have an active bleed again from her lungs, which was...
We thought it was another pulmonary hemorrhage, and that's what started this whole thing.
Yeah.
But thankfully, that wasn't the case.
Yeah, we were concerned it was another pulmonary hemorrhage, which we were like, oh my goodness, this poor girl is going through it. However, it was because the tube that they intubated her with was a little too deep a couple of times that they were trying, and it caused an active bleed. But over the course of the next week, it actually started to slow up. So yeah, she was re-intubated. So we literally were back at square one almost a month into our time in the NICU. So the enemy threw his best shot again. You know, when you think you're over the hill or the mountain and then it comes back around, it's, you know, trying to discourage your faith, trying to make you want to give up. But we just had to continue believing. You know, at that point, it was God did it once, he's going to do it again. And again, that was a very, very humbling time to be back where we were at the beginning. So yeah, that week, after she was intubated, that next week was a huge week. They were trying to monitor her and see what was going on. And they did some imaging and found out that the reason for her tank and just her oxygen levels was because she had a collapsed lung. So one of her lungs collapsed, and she was fighting to, you know, breathe with a collapsed lung, which was really good to find out. It was good to know that that's why she was struggling, but we were hoping that it healed correctly and that we had the goal of extubating again. So it was a week later, they said, okay, you know, we're gonna try to extubate her because she was able to wean down a little bit on the oxygen levels while she was on the ventilator. And they did the extubation, and I remember before that, just kind of praying like, Lord, abundantly more than we can ask, say, or think. And I just was believing that she would breathe above and beyond what she needed to when they extubated her. And that's really kind of what happened. She was extubated and put back on the CPAP mask, and she breathed really well. Her oxygen levels were in the high 90s, which was unstable, which was amazing. It was so much of a relief, and just again another miracle. And again, just thankful to the Lord ultimately, but also the doctors and nurses that were able to help save her again. After that, I think
it was another like 2 weeks. She slowly started, you know, again, it's kind of the same scenario, doing better. We weaned down on her oxygen levels. We went back to the ram cannula.
Yeah, so she was back.
Restarted the whole process.
Yeah, she was back to the good place she was before she had that collapsed lung. So we're building back up again, and you know, fear tries to creep in and whatever. Like, oh, is it going to remain this way, or is she going to stay healthy, or what if something else happens? Also, along this entire time, little thing we mentioned this, she was in isolation in her room because of...
She had staph MRSA.
Yeah, she had staph infection like throughout this whole time.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I think it was kind of a blessing. Like, they had to garb up when they came into her room. And
healthy.
Yeah, so there was other babies that were around us, obviously, in the NICU. And there was sick babies. There was a lot of things going around. RSV was really, really going around in the NICU at that time. And they had to garb up every time they came into Aria's room. So we know that the Lord protects her in that regard as well. So yeah, about 2 weeks later, 2 to 3 weeks later, she's starting to progress. And we get to the point, I think October 31st.
I think so.
30th or 31st. We should know. It was
I know.
like the best day ever. I think it was the 30th actually. They were like, let's try to take her off oxygen and see what she does. Like, let's.
And when they said that, we thought they meant like
The
keep her
ventilator.
still on oxygen, but just a normal nasal cannula, like just plain oxygen.
Yeah.
But they had meant no, let's try her off of everything completely and
Yeah.
just see what happens.
Yeah, we were kind of like, what? Okay,
Yeah.
like let's try it.
Right.
Like, and you know, obviously we had prayed for this stuff, you know, for her to progress and to breathe on her own and to be healed and all those things. And then the day comes where it's time, and they took her off of all oxygen and she breathed on her own. And I think that was probably one of the best days of our life. Like, we just weren't expecting it
Yeah.
to happen that day.
Yeah.
And the fact that she
did great.
she did amazing.
Yeah.
Like, it was, I think we just looked at each other and that was the first time we like cried tears of joy. Just like, wow, like, Lord, this is incredible. Because we were kind of under the impression, I mean, Emily obviously is a NICU nurse, she knows a lot. And under the impression that potentially we might have to go home on oxygen eventually. That's a normal thing for NICU parents. But the Lord really answered our prayers, and she was able to breathe on her own. After that point, she had to use some just regular oxygen.
Yeah,
like,
sparingly.
sparingly.
For 10 minutes at a
Yeah,
time.
10 minutes at a time if we got her out and we're holding her outside of the isolette and things like that. But it was just, again, probably one of the best days of our lives. I'm speaking for myself, but
Well, me too.
but for you as well, and hopefully Aria's. I don't know that she'll remember, but yeah, there was just a lot that kind of got us to that point. It was a very much needed mountain that was moved at that point in time in our journey in the NICU. It felt amazing to really experience that together as a family, and to see her breathing on her own. It just brought tears to our eyes. And yeah, so that's kind of where we're going to end this video. We're going to continue to do 2 more parts. We're going to talk about her feeding in the next video and the whole challenge that has brought and our journey with that. And then hopefully at the end, maybe like a part 4, we'll kind of give some tips to other NICU parents, and kind of just some advice about the NICU. And yeah, we're going to just celebrate her birthday today, and her birthday party is coming up this Sunday. So if you guys want to continue to follow our journey, just stay in contact with us on social media, and I hope you have a good day.
Bye.